Imagine you're a billionaire CEO commanding the boardroom of your Manhattan empire, where every nod bends to your will. But one call about your ailing grandfather pulls you from your penthouse to a quiet nursing home in upstate New York, where you meet Emily. A nurse whose gentle smile cracks the walls around your heart. 20 years ago, you swore off love, burned by betrayal and gold diggers. Now fate offers a chance at something real. Can a man who has everything find the courage to risk it all for love? Will the weight of his empire crush this fragile connection? Or can two worlds bridge the gap? Before we dive into this heartwarming story of rediscovery, family, and redemption, please subscribe to stay updated with more touching tales. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. Join us to see if James Carter and Emily Nguyen can find a love that defies their differences, or if some hearts are too guarded to open again. The glass elevator soared 50 floors in a heartbeat, whisking James Carter to the penthouse boardroom of Carter Tower, the gleaming cornerstone of his family's legacy in Manhattan's pulsing skyline. At 36, James was the embodiment of success, CEO of Carter Enterprises, with a fortune that crowned him one of America's wealthiest bachelors. His custom Armani suit clung to his athletic frame, and his dark hair was styled with meticulous precision, not a strand out of place. "Mr. Carter, the board's waiting." His assistant, Sarah, said, as he stepped into the marble-lined corridor, her voice professional, yet tinged with deference. James nodded curtly, striding toward the conference room. Employees parted like a tide, some in reverence, others in quiet fear. He'd grown accustomed to it. Years of superficial connections and women drawn to his wealth had taught him to embrace distance. Fear was cleaner than betrayal, a lesson hard learned in a world where loyalty was often bought. The board meeting was a well-rehearsed dance. Another tech startup acquired another 100 million folded into the Carter empire. The board members flashed polished smiles, their minds on bonuses and stock options. "Brilliant work, James Victoria Langley," the newest board member said afterward, her hand lingering on his sleeve. Her manicured nails gleamed against the dark fabric. Dinner tonight to celebrate James offered a practiced smile. "I'm booked." It was a lie he'd perfected, one that kept women like Victoria beautiful, ambitious, and calculating at arm's length. Her eyes sharp with intent, assessed his wealth and influence, never the man beneath. Another time she said her tone undeterred, a predator circling patiently. In his office, with its sweeping view of Manhattan's skyline, James barely registered the city's glow. He sifted through financial reports, his focus mechanical, until his personal phone rang a rare interruption. "Mr. Carter, this is Willow Creek Nursing Home," a calm voice said. "It's about your grandfather, Thomas Carter." James's fingers tightened around the phone, his pulse quickening. "What's happened?" "Nothing urgent, sir. We've adjusted his medication and he's been asking for you." Guilt flooded him, sharp and unyielding. Thomas was the only person who'd ever loved him unconditionally, seeing past the fortune to the boy he'd raised. Yet here he was, tucked away in a nursing home, while James chased deals that felt increasingly empty. "I'll be there tomorrow," he said, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. He'll be thrilled to hear that the nurse replied, her warmth carrying through the line. James opened a desk drawer, retrieving a faded photograph himself at 10, grinning beside his grandfather on a weathered dock at Lake George, fishing rods in hand, the summer sun glinting off the water. It was a time before his parents' tragic car accident, before the weight of Carter Enterprises reshaped his life, before he learned to guard his heart against a world that saw only his wealth. He dialed Sarah. "Clear my schedule for tomorrow afternoon." The next day, James's sleek black Porsche looked jarringly out of place among the modest sedans in Willow Creek's parking lot. He'd ensured his grandfather had the finest care money could buy, but leaving him here still felt like a quiet betrayal. At the reception desk, a woman with kind eyes greeted him. "Mr. Carter, you're early. Is that an issue?" His tone was sharper than intended, a reflex from a world where control was currency. "Not at all," she said, unfazed by his edge. "Your grandfather's in the garden with Emily, one of our nurses. She's been wonderful with him." James followed the path to the garden, pausing when he heard his grandfather's laughter, a sound he hadn't heard in years, bright and unguarded. The garden was a serene oasis with vibrant roses and shaded benches beneath ancient oaks. There, strolling along a gravel path, was Thomas Carter. Once a commanding presence, he was now 82. His frame slightly stooped, but his face radiated joy. Beside him walked a young woman in pale blue scrubs, her hand gently supporting his elbow. Her warm brown skin and curly hair, tied back in a practical ponytail, caught the sunlight. She wasn't the polished beauty of James's Manhattan Circle, but her genuine smile stopped him in his tracks, a quiet force that stirred something unfamiliar. "And then I told the banker, 'I'm old, not foolish, I won't take that interest rate.'" Thomas finished a story, his voice animated. The woman Emily laughed her delight, unforced and infectious. "You really said that, Mr. Thomas?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "You're too much. When you've lived as long as I have, you earn the right to speak your mind," Thomas replied, then spotted his grandson. "James, my boy." Emily glanced up, her smile softening as her eyes met James's. There was no flicker of recognition, no deference to his status, just a calm, assessing gaze. It was both refreshing and disorienting, like stepping into uncharted territory. Grandpa James said, crossing the path to embrace Thomas gently, mindful of his frailty. "You came." Thomas patted his back, his grip surprisingly firm. "I was just telling Emily about that monster trout we caught at Lake George. Remember, you've been keeping secrets, Mr. Thomas." Emily teased, her tone light. "No mention your grandson's a fisherman? I haven't fished in years." James admitted, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "That's a shame," Emily said, her voice free of pretense. "Mr. Thomas says those fishing trips were the best days of his life." The words landed like a quiet blow, stirring guilt James had buried under boardroom victories. "They were good days," he said softly, his eyes lingering on his grandfather's weathered face. "I'll leave you two to catch up," Emily said, stepping back. "Mr. Thomas, don't forget your cane if you get tired." To James, she added, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Carter." As she walked away, James watched her pause to speak with an elderly woman in a wheelchair, kneeling to meet her gaze with a warmth that felt rare in his world. "She's something special, isn't she?" Thomas said, following James's stare, a knowing glint in his eye. "The nurse." "She seems capable," James said, choosing his words carefully. Thomas chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "Capable Emily Nguyen is the only one here who treats me like a person, not a checklist. She brings me books, knows I take my coffee black, and listens to my stories like they matter. That's more than capability, son." James guided his grandfather to a bench beneath a sprawling oak, its leaves rustling in the breeze. "I should visit more," he admitted, the weight of his absence settling heavily. "Yes, you should." Thomas said, his tone gentle but firm, free of judgment. But I know you're busy running the company. The company you built. James reminded him, a touch of pride in his voice. Thomas waved a dismissive hand. I built it for our family's future, not to replace family. Your grandmother would have had my hide for seeing how you've walled yourself off, James. The mention of his grandmother, Ruth, stung. Her death when James was 15 had left a void neither he nor Thomas had ever filled. I'm not walled off, James said, defensive. I'm focused. On what? More money? Thomas's eyes, sharp despite his age, pinned him. You've got enough for 3 lifetimes. What's it all for if you're alone? Before James could respond, his phone buzzed Michael, his CFO, with a crisis about a delayed merger. I need to take this, he said, stepping away to handle the call. It was a minor issue, resolved in minutes, but it pulled him back to his world of urgency and control. When he returned, Thomas was chatting with Emily again, who'd brought him a cup of tea, and was showing him photos on a tablet, her laughter mingling with his. Look at this, James. Thomas called, his face alight. Emily's showing me her community garden. They grow food for the local food bank, fresh vegetables for folks who can't afford them. Emily looked shy, tucking a curl behind her ear. It's just a small project my friends and I started. She's being modest, Thomas said, his voice brimming with pride. She works here full-time, volunteers at the garden, and studies to become a registered nurse. That's a life well lived. That's impressive, James said, surprised by the sincerity in his own voice. He meant it. Emily shrugged, her humility disarming. Just trying to make a difference. She glanced at her watch. I should get back, Mr. Thomas. Your physical therapy is in 30 minutes. Please call me James, he said, hoping to bridge the gap between them. She nodded, her smile polite but guarded. James. As she walked away, Thomas grinned, a mischievous spark in his eyes. She doesn't like you much. What? Why not? James protested. She doesn't even know me. Exactly, Thomas said, chuckling. You're just another rich relative who shows up once in a blue moon. She's got your number, son. That's ridiculous, James muttered, but his eyes followed Emily as she disappeared into the building. They spent another hour together, Thomas sharing stories of Willow Creek's residents, a former pilot, a retired teacher, a woman who danced on Broadway. Each tale was vivid, full of life, and James realized how much he'd missed by staying away. When it was time for Thomas's therapy, James walked him to the recreation room, their steps slow and deliberate. Come back soon, Thomas said, gripping his hand with surprising strength. And bring your fishing rod. There's a pond here, not Lake George, but the company's what matters. I will, James promised, the words carrying a weight he hadn't felt before. On his way out, he stopped at the reception desk where Emily was updating patient files. Thank you for taking such good care of my grandfather, he said, his tone softer than usual. She looked up, surprised, her brown eyes studying him. It's my job, James. But you're welcome. He's one of my favorites, a real gem. Tell me about this garden project, James said, leaning against the counter. Grandpa seemed excited about it. Emily's face lit up, her reserve melting. We turned an empty lot in my neighborhood into a community garden. It's small, but we grow tomatoes, peppers, herbs, things we donate to families who can't afford fresh produce. It's about giving back. That's admirable, James said, impressed by her passion. Does it need funding? Her smile dimmed slightly, a hint of wariness returning. We're okay, thanks. It's a community effort. Money helps, but hands in the dirt make the real difference. James wasn't used to his offers being declined. In his world, money solved everything. If you change your mind, let me know, he said, trying to keep his tone light. She nodded politely, returning to her computer, effectively dismissing him. Irritated, yet intrigued, James drove back to his Manhattan penthouse, its sleek, minimalist design feeling colder than ever. Pouring a whiskey, he stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city's lights blurring, as his mind drifted to Emily's unguarded smile and his grandfather's renewed laughter. On impulse, he searched online for community gardens in upstate New York, quickly finding Emily's project in a working-class neighborhood. The website was simple but vibrant, with photos of volunteers tending raised beds and children learning to compost. In one image, Emily laughed a smudge of dirt on her cheek as she helped a young girl plant seedlings. She looked alive, grounded in a way his world rarely was authentic, in a way that made his tailored life feel hollow. His phone rang, shattering the moment Victoria. Her voice smooth as silk. "James, we're at Skyline for drinks. Join us to celebrate the acquisition." He nearly declined the emptiness of his penthouse looming, but relented. "I'll be there in 30. Skyline was a rooftop bar for New York's elite, all glass and glamour. Victoria greeted him with a kiss that landed too close to his lips, her hand resting on his arm. "You've been unavailable lately," she said, her tone teasing but pointed. "Personal matters," James replied, accepting a champagne flute from a passing waiter. "I visited my grandfather." "How sweet," Victoria said, her voice dripping with disinterest as she steered the conversation to business. Now about the next acquisition. The evening dragged on, a parade of business talk and calculated flirtations. James felt detached, his mind wandering back to Willow Creek's garden, to Emily's laughter. At the bar, Michael, his CFO, joined him, swirling a bourbon. "Victoria's got her eye on you," he said with a grin. "Smart move, her family's connections could fast-track our European expansion." "Is that all relationships are to you?" James asked, his voice sharper than intended. "Business moves." Michael laughed, unfazed. "In our world, what else would they be? True love at a coffee shop?" "That's not our story, James." The words lingered, gnawing at him as he left early, the city's pulse fading to a hum. He drove aimlessly, his Porsche, gliding through the night until he found himself near Emily's garden. It was locked and dark at 10 p.m., the raised beds barely visible under streetlights. Feeling foolish, he spotted her leaving a community center across the street, laughing with friends, her silhouette vibrant against the night. He slumped in his seat, embarrassed by the impulse to chase a woman who saw him as just another rich outsider. The next morning, determined to refocus, James called Willow Creek. "I'd like to visit my grandfather tomorrow. When's Emily Nguyen's shift?" "Miss Nguyen works mornings until 3 p.m., the receptionist said. "Your grandfather will be thrilled to see you again." James rearranged his schedule, a restless energy driving him. That night he dreamed of fishing with Thomas, the lake shimmering as Emily waved from the shore, a picnic spread beside her. He woke unsettled, the dream's warmth clashing with his reality. Why had one encounter with her shaken him so deeply? At Willow Creek, he arrived with a fishing rod, feeling absurdly out of place in the elegant lobby. 2 visits in 2 days, Mr. Carter, the receptionist, teased, her eyes twinkling. "Is Emily or your grandfather in the garden?" "She's in the art room with him," she replied, her smile knowing. The art room was bathed in sunlight, with residents painting at long tables. Thomas focused on a watercolor of a Lake George cabin, his hands steady despite his age. Emily moved between them, offering gentle encouragement. "Add a little more water, Mrs. Lee," she said. "See how the colors blend. That's beautiful." She spotted James and paused. "Back so soon, Mr. Carter? I promised Grandpa we'd fish," James said, holding up the rod awkwardly. "And please call me James." She nodded, her smile warmer than before. "Art class ends in 15 minutes. Want to join? There's an empty seat." Painting with elderly residents was far outside James's comfort zone, but Thomas waved him over eagerly. "I haven't painted since grade school," James admitted as Emily led him to a table. "No time like now," she said, her voice encouraging. "We're painting memories today, places that mean something to you." James sat beside Thomas, who was recreating their old lakeside cabin with surprising detail. "Remember those summers?" Thomas asked, his eyes distant with nostalgia. "I do," James said softly, the memories flooding back the creak of the dock, the splash of fish, his grandfather's patient lessons. Emily handed him a blank paper and watercolors. Hesitantly, he began painting the Lake George dock, his strokes clumsy but vivid with emotion. The smell of the lake, the warmth of those long-ago summers, it all came rushing back, grounding him in a way his boardroom never could. When the class ended, Emily collected the paintings with care. "We'll frame these next week," she told the residents, her smile bright. Thomas stood with his cane slower than before. "Ready to fish, my boy?" "Absolutely," James said, surprised by his own enthusiasm. He turned to Emily. "Join us if you're free." She looked startled, her brown eyes widening. "That's kind, but I have other patients to check on. Maybe another time." Thomas chuckled as they headed to the pond, his steps deliberate. "You're barking up the wrong tree, James. I was just being polite," James protested, his face warming under his grandfather's knowing gaze. In 36 years, polite never meant inviting someone to join us. Thomas teased, his voice rich with amusement. At the pond, they cast their lines, the water rippling gently under the afternoon sun. The silence was comfortable, a rare peace James hadn't felt in years. "She's not like the women you know," Thomas said after a while, his tone thoughtful. "You don't even know her." "Exactly," James said, defensive. "The women I date, do I know them, or do they just fit a mold? Beautiful, ambitious, connected." Thomas's eyes twinkled. "You're asking the right questions. Your grandmother was a diner waitress when I met her, not the banking heiress your mother liked to claim." James blinked, the revelation catching him off guard. "What?" Thomas laughed, a deep, nostalgic sound. "I stopped at a diner after a bad deal, feeling sorry for myself. Ruth served me coffee and pie, told me to stop moping. By the time I finished my slice, I knew she was the one." "Why didn't you tell me?" James asked, reeling. "Your parents cared about image," Thomas said. "After they died, it didn't seem worth correcting the story. Ruth cared about people, not status like Emily does." They fished in silence, catching nothing but savoring the moment. When Thomas grew tired, James helped him back to his room, the walker's soft clack echoing in the hall. "Come tomorrow?" Thomas asked, his voice hopeful. "I'll try," James said, squeezing his hand. As he left, he passed Emily, helping an elderly man with physical therapy exercises, her patience unwavering. "Leaving already," she called out. "Grandpa's tired, but we had fun at the pond," James said, pausing. "Catch anything?" she asked, a playful glint in her eye. "Just memories," James said, surprising himself with the sentiment. Emily's smile reached her eyes, warm and unguarded. "Those are the best kind," she said. As James started to reply, his phone buzzed Victoria again. He silenced it, frustration flickering. "Sorry." "Important business?" Emily asked, her expression cooling slightly. "Nothing urgent," James said, pocketing the phone. "I noticed your garden needs better irrigation. I'd like to help." Her eyebrows rose, a mix of surprise and skepticism. "You researched my garden, Mr. Carter. I was curious about Grandpa's stories," he said. "And it's not just money I want to help personally get my hands dirty." She studied him, her skepticism softening. "You in a garden? Honestly, it's hard to picture. Maybe there's more to me than you think," James said, holding her gaze. A flicker of interest crossed her face before she shook her head. a small smile tugging at her lips. "Garden work days Saturday, 8 to noon," she said. "If you're serious, come but leave your checkbook at home." James spent the week visiting Thomas daily, timing his visits to overlap with Emily's shifts. He learned she lived with her younger sister Mia, sang in a community choir, and had a weakness for the nursing home's chocolate chip cookies. Thomas watched their interactions with amusement, often contriving reasons to leave them alone. On Friday, Thomas developed a slight fever. "Nothing serious," the nurse assured James. "Just a cold, but we're monitoring him." Emily appeared with a thermos of tea, her expression soft. "His favorite chamomile," she said. "How's he doing?" "Stable, they say," James replied, worry creasing his brow. "I just wish I'd been here more." "It's normal to worry about those we love, Emily," said her hand, brushing his shoulder. The simple gesture left him momentarily speechless, a warmth spreading through him. "Thank you for being here for him," she added. "It means more than you know." "I should have been here years ago," James admitted, his voice low. "You're here now," Emily said, her eyes steady. "That's what matters." She paused, then smiled. "See you at the garden tomorrow, 8 a.m. "Sharp?" James confirmed, catching the teasing spark in her gaze. "I'll wear something dirtyable." She laughed, the sound light and genuine. "I'll believe it when I see it." Saturday morning. James arrived at the garden in jeans and a button-down, feeling like an outsider among the volunteers. He'd brought a tray of coffee, hoping to make a good impression. The garden buzzed with activity, children running between raised beds, adults planting and weeding. Emily emerged from a shed with seedling trays, wearing faded jeans and a bandana, her curls barely contained. She did a double take when she saw him. "You actually came?" "I said I would," James said, offering the coffee. "For you." "Thanks," she said, shifting the trays to accept a cup. "How's your grandfather fever's gone?" James said, relief evident. "He's back to telling stories." He took a tray from her. "Where do these go?" She led him to a raised bed. Tomato seedlings, 12 inches apart. She demonstrated planting one with practiced care. James's first attempt was clumsy, the seedling tilting in the soil. "Not bad for a first try," Emily said, her tone encouraging. "Focus less on keeping your genes clean and more on the roots. These genes are a lost cause," James said, noticing dirt smudges on his knees. Strangely, he didn't care. They worked side by side, planting tomatoes under the morning sun. James's technique improved, and he found an unexpected joy in the tactile simplicity of the task. The garden hummed with community people, sharing tools, swapping stories, laughing together. "How did this start?" James asked as they moved to a row of peppers. 3 years ago, this was a trash-filled lot," Emily said, her voice animated. "My sister Mia and I grew up nearby, always wishing for more green space. We got a city grant, rallied neighbors, and built this." "You did all this in 3 years?" James asked, glancing at the thriving beds. "With a lot of help," Emily said, gesturing to the volunteers. "Last year we grew 2,000 pounds of vegetables for families and the food bank." "That's incredible," James said, his admiration genuine. "It's not just food, it's hope." Emily studied him, a hint of surprise in her eyes. "You really mean that, don't you?" Before he could answer, a teenage girl ran up. "Emily, the irrigation's leaking again." "I'll check it," Emily said, then turned to James. "Can you finish the peppers?" "I think I can handle it," he said, feigning confidence. For 2 hours he planted peppers and helped kids tend a strawberry patch. Dirt caked his hands, and a sunburn warmed his neck, but he felt more fulfilled than after any boardroom victory. At noon, volunteers gathered around a picnic table laden with homemade dishes, salads, sandwiches, pies. James, having brought only coffee, felt awkward, but Emily handed him a plate. First-timers get a free pass, she said. Next time, bring something. Next time, James echoed, warmed by the implication of a future here. A young woman approached Emily's sister, Mia, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Is that James Carter?" Mia asked, grinning. "Emily's told me about you. All good things, I hope," James said, glancing at Emily, who focused intently on her sandwich. "Interesting things," Mia teased, "like how you're suddenly Mr. devoted grandson, always visiting during Emily's shifts." "Mia," Emily warned, her cheeks flushing. "What?" "Just making conversation," Mia said, winking. To James, she added, "Billionaire by week, gardener by weekend." Quite the transformation. "I'm just helping out," James said modestly. "We appreciate it," Mia said, heading off to lead a compost demonstration. Emily groaned. "Sorry about her. She has no filter." "I like her," James said. "She reminds me of you." "Mia's the outgoing one," Emily said. "I'm more reserved." "Reserved? You called me out the first day we met." James said, grinning. Emily looked embarrassed. "I judged you too quickly, your suit, your car, how you barely noticed the other residents." "Fair points," James admitted. "I haven't been grandson of the year." "But you've been here every day this week," Emily said. "That counts for a lot." After lunch, James helped build a trellis under the guidance of a retired carpenter who cared more about his effort than his status. As the workday ended, he helped Emily store tools in the shed. "Will your grandfather expect you today?" she asked, wiping sweat from her brow. "I'll visit tonight," James said, "but I have time if you need more help." "Actually, I was heading to see him too," Emily said. "I sometimes bring him books on my days off." "Want to go together?" "I'd like that," Hans said, his heart lifting. They drove to Willow Creek, finding Thomas in the common room playing chess with a fellow resident. His face lit up when he saw them. James and Emily, what a treat. Emily produced a small bag. "Zucchini bread from the garden's first harvest," she said, handing it to Thomas. "You two are spoiling me," Thomas said, his eyes twinkling. They sat together, Thomas sharing stories of his early days building Carter Enterprises, Emily listening with genuine interest. Her warmth, her care for his grandfather drew James in deeper than any attraction he'd ever felt. For the first time, James, who could buy almost anything, wanted something money couldn't secure Emily's heart. The weeks that followed were a delicate balance. James's mornings were consumed by Carter Enterprises meetings, mergers, and market strategies. But his afternoons belonged to Thomas, and his Saturdays to the garden, where he became a regular volunteer, planting, weeding, and learning to prune. Emily was the gravity pulling him back, her presence, a quiet anchor. One morning, Victoria cornered him in his office, her arms crossed. "You missed the board meeting yesterday," she said, her tone sharp. "Michael had to cover." "Family shortly commitment," James said, not looking up from his laptop. With your grandfather, Victoria perched on his desk, her perfume sharp. "You've changed, James. People do," he said, meeting her gaze. "It's more than that," she said. "You're delegating key decisions, leaving early. The board's talking. Let them," James said, though a flicker of concern stirred. "The company's performing." "For now," Victoria said, her voice low. "Success demands focus, James. Don't lose it." Her hand brushed his, a calculated move. "I'm looking out for you. Don't forget the charity gala next weekend. As major donors, the company expects us there together." James had forgotten the gala, an annual event for children's education. He'd always seen it as a publicity stunt, a chance for Manhattan's elite to flaunt their generosity. But now Emily's influence made him question how much of the funds actually reached the kids. That afternoon, he found her helping Thomas into a wheelchair at Willow Creek. "What's wrong?" James asked, his heart lurching. "Just x-rays," Thomas said, waving off his concern. The doctor's checking my hip after a little stumble. A fall. James's voice sharpened. Why wasn't I told? It was minor. Emily explained, her tone calm. He caught himself on a table. Dr. Peterson's just being thorough. I didn't want to worry you, Thomas added, his eyes soft. I'm never too busy for you, James said firmly, walking beside the wheelchair as Emily pushed it to the medical wing. How are you really, Grandpa? Old Thomas admitted with a chuckle. But your visits are the best medicine, son. James squeezed his shoulder, guilt and love intertwining. I should have been here more. Better late than never, Thomas said. And if Emily's part of why you're here, I'm not complaining. James's face warmed. Is it that obvious? To me, yes, Thomas said. To her, she's too humble to think a man like you would notice her. Before James could respond, Emily returned from speaking with the doctor. They're ready for you, Mr. Thomas, she said. As Thomas was wheeled away, James and Emily sat in the waiting area, the hospital-like quiet pressing around them. My company's gala is next weekend, James said, breaking the silence. It raises money for kids' education. Would you come with me? Emily's eyes widened, caught off guard. A gala? I don't exactly own gala dresses, James. I could. He stopped, as her expression cooled, realizing his mistake. I mean, it's not about the dress. I'd just like you there with me. She hesitated, her fingers twisting together. What are we doing here, James? She asked, gesturing between them. You visiting daily? Volunteering at the garden, now this gala? Where's this going? The question hit him like a cold wave. I enjoy your company, he said carefully, searching for the right words. I feel different with you. Real. I enjoy your company too, she admitted, her voice soft. But our worlds are so different. You run a corporation. I work here volunteer study. Your life's complicated people like that woman who calls you on weekends. Victoria's just a board member, James said, wincing at how weak it sounded. Emily raised an eyebrow. Who calls on weekends and makes you frown? It's complicated, James said, then regretted it immediately. That's my point, Emily said, her tone gentle but firm. Your world's full of complications, mine isn't. That doesn't mean we can't? James began. Date. She finished, her voice barely above a whisper. And then what, you'd tire of my world or try to make me fit yours? I'd never do that, James protested, his voice earnest. Maybe not on purpose, she said, her eyes searching his. Their conversation paused as Thomas returned the X-rays showing no serious damage. They ate dinner together in his room, the mood lighter, but the unspoken tension lingering. Later, James walked Emily to her car in the parking lot. Forget the gala, he said, his voice low. But I'd like to see you outside of here, maybe dinner. Nothing fancy. She studied him, then nodded, a small smile breaking through. Thursday, 3 p.m. There's a cafe near the garden with great sandwiches. Thursday at 3. James confirmed, his heart lifting. I'll be there. That night, he couldn't sleep. Emily's words echoing in his mind. Did she think he'd try to change her? The idea troubled him deeply. The next morning, Michael waited in his office, his expression serious. The board's getting nervous about your focus, he said, leaning against the desk. Victoria's stirring things up. Of course she is, James thought, his jaw tightening. What's she saying? That you're distracted, Michael said. Some are questioning if you're still the right leader for Carter Enterprises. Anger flared hot and sharp. I built this company into what it is. Your grandfather built it, Michael corrected. You expanded it. They want to know you're still hungry, James. I have a personal life now, James said, his voice steady. That doesn't mean I'm less committed. Then prove it, Michael said. The gala, the European expansion, show up, take charge. I'll be at the gala. James set his mind already elsewhere. Thursday afternoon, James left the office early, trading his suit for jeans, and meeting Emily at the cafe. She sat outside in a simple sundress, reading a novel about a community saving a historic landmark. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, a playful note in his voice. She looked up, smiling. "I was saving it for a billionaire, but you'll do." He laughed, the sound easing the tension of his week. "What's the book?" She showed him the cover. "Mia says I'm predictable, always reading about people making a difference. There are worse things to be predictable about," James said. They ordered sandwiches and iced tea, the conversation flowing effortlessly. Emily shared a story about a new Willow Creek resident, a retired music teacher who played violin for the others, filling the halls with melody. "How's your grandfather after the X-rays?" she asked, her brow furrowing with concern. "Clear, but he's using a walker for safety," James said. "You seem worried." "Everything okay?" He hesitated, then opened up, the words spilling out. "The board thinks I'm not committed because I'm prioritizing family. Grandpa the garden, you." "That's unfair," Emily said, her voice indignant. "Everyone deserves a life outside work. Not when billions are at stake," James said, then winced. "Sorry, that sounded wrong." She laughed, the sound light and forgiving. "No, you're right. I can't imagine that pressure. If I mess up, someone gets the wrong pudding. If you do, jobs vanish, stocks crash." "Is that why I've been so driven?" James mused, almost to himself. "Partly. After my parents died, the company became my identity. It was all I had. And now," she asked, her eyes searching his. "Now you, Grandpa the garden, it's shown me there's more to life than profits," he said, his voice raw with honesty. Her expression softened, a quiet warmth in her gaze. "That's not a bad realization?" "Try telling that to Victoria, James," said a wry smile, tugging at his lips. "She sees us as a power couple, a corporate merger. And you don't." Emily asked, her tone careful. "I used to think it made sense," he admitted. "Similar goals, backgrounds, a partnership, not a marriage. But it's not what I want anymore." Their eyes met, the afternoon sun catching the curls framing her face. She was more beautiful than any model he'd dated, her authenticity outshining their polished perfection. "Emily," a voice interrupted Mia, striding toward their table with a grin. "I thought that was you," Mia said, her eyes dancing with mischief. "Nice to see you again, James." "Sorry about her," Emily said, after Mia left to join friends nearby. "She loves embarrassing me." "I like her," James said. "She cares about you." "Too much sometimes," Emily said, checking her watch. "I need to go garden budget meeting." "Need help?" James offered. "I'm good with numbers." She considered him, then nodded. An extra pair of eyes couldn't hurt. But no blank checks, the garden's about community effort. That evening in the garden's cramped office, James reviewed budgets with Emily, Mia, and the coordinator, Javier. The irrigation system's outdated, Javier said, frustration evident. A drip system would save water, but it's $2,000 over budget. "What about a fundraiser?" James suggested. They brainstormed, settling on a garden-to-table dinner with donated food and an auction. James offered to secure restaurant donations, leveraging his contacts. "I'll handle the logistics, not just the money," he promised. After the meeting, he walked Emily to her car under a streetlight's soft glow. "Thanks for letting me help," he said. "You had good ideas," she admitted, her smile genuine. "And you didn't try to just pay for everything." "I'm learning," he said, grinning. Emily looked at him thoughtfully, the night air cool around them. "When we met, I thought you were just a rich guy visiting out of duty," she said. "I judged you too fast." "I'm sorry." And now, he asked, his voice soft, hopeful. Now I think there's more to James Carter than the CEO, she said. She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, a fleeting touch that sent warmth through him. Good night, James. He touched the spot as she drove away, grinning like a schoolboy. The next days were a whirlwind, running Carter Enterprises, visiting Thomas, planning the fundraiser. On Friday, Emily appeared in his office doorway, looking out of place amid the sleek decor. I was downtown for a nursing school interview, she said, her eyes wide as she took in the Manhattan view. How'd it go? James asked, standing to greet her. Well, I think, she said. This place is different. Too corporate, he asked, seeing his world through her eyes. Just not mine, she said, noticing the photo of him and Thomas on his desk. I like that you keep this here. A reminder of what matters, James said. What brings you by? I've been thinking about the gala, she said, her voice hesitant. If the invitation's still open, I'd like to go. Really? James's face lit up. What changed your mind? Your grandfather, she said. He said it's important to you and I believe in kids' education. Plus, I'm curious about your world. I'd be honored, James said. Don't worry about fitting in, you'll be with me. Victoria walked in without knocking, stopping short at the sight of Emily. I didn't realize you had a visitor, she said, her tone icy. Victoria, this is Emily, Engwyn, James said. Emily Victoria Langley, a board member. Victoria's eyes swept over Emily's simple dress, her smile thin. How nice. A new client. No, I work at Willow Creek, caring for James's grandfather. Emily said, her voice steady. How noble, Victoria, said, her tone dripping with condescension. James, we need to discuss gala seating. The governor's attending. Add Emily to the head table, James said firmly. She's my guest. Victoria's smile froze, her eyes narrowing. Your guest. But we always attend together. Plans change, James said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Victoria left the door, closing sharply behind her. That was awkward, Emily said, her brow furrowing. She wasn't expecting me. Don't worry about Victoria, James said. I want you there. The gala night arrived, the Grand Plaza Hotel aglow with opulence. James waited at the entrance, ignoring the photographer's shouts. Emily arrived in a borrowed navy gown, her curls swept up, looking both stunning and nervous. I feel like an imposter, she whispered, clutching her clutch. You're the most genuine person here, James assured, taking her hand. Inside the ballroom sparkled with chandeliers and towering floral arrangements. This is extravagant, Emily murmured, her eyes wide. How much of the million raised actually reaches the kids? James hadn't considered it before her question. I don't know, he admitted. I should find out. Michael and his wife approached, their smiles polished. You must be the mysterious date, Michael said to Emily. Emily Nguyen, she said, shaking hands. I work at Willow Creek and run a community garden. How interesting, Michael's wife said, her tone echoing Victoria's. First gala? Yes, Emily said simply. It's quite an event. James felt a surge of protectiveness. Emily's starting nursing school too, he added. Wonderful, Michael said, his politeness thinly veiled. He pulled James aside. The governor's here. You need to greet him downtown project. Go, Emily said, squeezing his hand. I'll be fine. At the head table, Victoria, in a striking red gown, barely acknowledged Emily, her smile tight. The Education Foundation's director presented, showing slides of children in new classrooms. Emily leaned close to James. I wonder if these programs reach my neighborhood, she whispered. Her perspective shifted his view, making the gala's grandeur feel hollow. After dinner, the auction began, featuring luxury items, Yacht weekends, private jets. James felt uneasy beside Emily, whose garden fed families for free. The final item, a Carter Enterprises-sponsored getaway, sold for $50,000, pushing the night's total to $1.2 million. The crowd cheered, but Emily's expression was unreadable. "Time to dance," James said, offering his hand. "Will you—" "I'm not a ballroom dancer," Emily said, hesitant. "Neither am I," he confessed, "but I'd like to hold you." She smiled, relenting. "When you put it that way." On the dance floor, James held her close, the music soft and enveloping. "Thank you for coming," he murmured. "I know this isn't your scene." "It's been eye-opening," she said. "Everyone's so focused on appearances. It's exhausting." "I never noticed," James admitted. "Your eyes make it look empty." He leaned down and she met him halfway in a tender kiss that warmed his core, oblivious to the crowd. "I wasn't expecting that," she whispered, her cheeks flushed. "I've wanted to for weeks," he admitted, his heart racing. Victoria tapped his shoulder, her expression cold. "The governor's leaving and wants to talk about the downtown project." "Go," Emily said, stepping back. "I'll get some air on the terrace." The conversation with the governor dragged on, filled with political posturing. When James returned, Emily was gone. A text read, "Had to leave. Not feeling well. Thanks for including me." Its formality sent a chill through him. His calls went to voicemail. Victoria appeared as he grabbed his coat. "Your date left?" she said, her tone smug. She looked upset. "What did you say to her?" James demanded, his voice low with anger. "Nothing," Victoria said, her innocence unconvincing. "Just girl talk. I mentioned these events are for networking, and the board expects you to settle with someone like me." She deserved to know. Fury surged through him. "You had no right. I was doing you a favor," Victoria said, unfazed. "She doesn't belong here, James." Everyone saw her borrowed dress, her awkwardness. "I don't care what they saw," James snapped. "She's worth more than this entire room." He stormed out, driving to the garden, dark and locked. Willow Creek hadn't seen her either. Desperate, he called Mia, waking her at midnight. "What's wrong?" she asked groggily. "I need to find Emily," James said. "She left the gala after Victoria told her she didn't belong. You kissed her and left her with that woman." Mia groaned. "She's probably home. She lives above me." She gave the address. At Emily's modest apartment, James knocked, his heart pounding. She opened the door in pajamas, her eyes red from crying. "It's late," she said, her voice quiet. "I couldn't leave things like this," James said. "Can I come in?" She let him in her cozy apartment filled with books, plants, and warmth, a stark contrast to his sterile penthouse. She curled up on the sofa. "Why'd you leave?" he asked, sitting beside her. "I didn't belong there," she said, her voice breaking. "Victoria just confirmed it. Everyone saw I was out of place, my dress, my manners. I don't care what they think." James insisted, his voice fierce. "You should," she said. "That's your world, your business, your social circle." Victoria said the board expects you to marry someone like her, an asset to the company. "The board doesn't decide who I love." James said the word slipping out. Emily's eyes widened, her breath catching. "Love, James, we barely know each other." "I know enough," he said, his voice raw. "You make me feel alive. You see me not the CEO. Kissing you felt like home." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I feel it too," she admitted. "But feelings aren't enough. What happens when you realize my World Care Home's gardens can't match yours? What if I don't want that world anymore?" James asked. "Tonight your questions about the gala's impact made me see how disconnected I've been. I want to use Carter Enterprises for real good, and I want you beside me." She looked skeptical. "Your board won't allow that. Let me handle them," he said. "Just tell me you'll give us a chance." After a long pause, she nodded, her voice barely audible. I want to believe this can work. James pulled her into his arms, her warmth grounding him. The next morning he visited Thomas in the garden where he sat sketching birds. How was the gala? Thomas asked, his eyes sharp. Educational, James said. Grandpa, I need advice. He poured out everything, his feelings for Emily Victoria's interference, the board's doubts, his desire to redirect the company toward meaning. I've been waiting for you to ask, Thomas said, setting his sketchpad aside. I built Carter Enterprises to make a difference, not just money. Your grandmother measured success by the good we did not, the profit. What about the board? James asked, his brow furrowing. You're the majority shareholder, Thomas said. They serve you. Remind them who's in charge. Realization dawned, a weight lifting. You're right. I don't need their approval. And Emily. Thomas added, his voice softening. She's like Ruth, caring about people, not status. I see how you look at her. I think I love her. James admitted, the words freeing. I know you do, Thomas said, smiling. Don't let her go. James prepared for a special board meeting, working late with Emily's input on community-focused initiatives. The morning of the meeting, she stood in his office doorway, her presence a quiet strength. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be, he said, kissing her softly. The boardroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation. Victoria sat confidently, her posture perfect. Michael looked uneasy, sensing a shift. We're here to discuss the company's future. James began, his voice steady. Victoria interrupted, her tone sharp. We have an agenda item, a vote of no confidence. Your distractions are compromising your leadership. James remained calm, his resolve unshaken. Before that, I'd like to introduce a guest. He opened the door. Thomas Carter, our founder. Thomas entered with his walker, his presence commanding despite his age. The board murmured, caught off guard. I wouldn't miss this, Thomas said, taking a seat. My grandson has something important to say. James presented his vision, profitability paired with sustainability and community investment, affordable housing, education programs, partnerships with local nonprofits. This isn't charity, he said, projecting data on the screen. Studies show socially responsible companies outperform competitors. This is smart business, and it's what Carter Enterprises was founded to do. Victoria scoffed. This is a radical shift, suspiciously timed with your new friend. My values drive this, James countered. Values this company was built on. Exactly, Thomas interjected, his voice firm. I started this company to make a difference. We've lost that under the chase for profit. Victoria pressed, undeterred. Sentiment doesn't drive shareholder value. It does, James said, pointing to the data. But it's also the right thing. He turned to the board, his gaze unwavering. As majority shareholder, I'm reshaping the board to align with this vision. Those who can't support it can step down. Victoria's confidence faltered, her eyes narrowing. You can't. He can, Thomas said, his tone final. I wrote the bylaws. The majority shareholder has the final say. James pulled the board. Most supported him, swayed by his conviction and Thomas's presence. Victoria and two allies refused, their faces tight with defiance. Thank you for your service, James said to them, but we're moving forward without you. After the meeting, Thomas squeezed his shoulder, his eyes shining. Your grandmother would be proud, James. So am I. 2 months later, the garden's summer festival bloomed into a vibrant celebration, growing from a fundraiser into a community cornerstone. James stood by the new drip irrigation system, watching children play in sprinklers, their laughter mingling with the hum of voices. Emily approached with 2 cups of lemonade, her curls catching the sunlight. Your grandfather's holding court by the tomatoes, she said, smiling. Bragging about his prize-winning days? Is he tired? James asked, concern flickering. He's having the time of his life, Emily said. Mia's got him judging the pie contest. James laughed, pulling her close. I've been thinking, he said, his voice low. That empty lot next to the garden, I bought it yesterday. Emily gasped, her eyes wide. What? Why, for the expansion, he said. An education area, a greenhouse, a community kitchen, whatever you envision. Tears welled in her eyes, her voice trembling. James, I don't know what to say. Say you'll help design it, he said, his heart pounding. And he knelt, pulling a simple diamond ring from his pocket. Say you'll marry me. Emily Nguyen, you've shown me what matters, love, not money. You've made me want to be better, to build a life that means something. Will you? Yes, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Yes, I will. Cheers erupted from the volunteers, and Thomas, who'd hobbled over with Mia's help. Told you she'd say yes, Thomas said, grinning. Just like Ruth did in that diner all those years ago. That evening, under the garden's oldest tree, James and Emily sat as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the beds. What made you decide? She asked, her hand in his. The company, the lot, the proposal. I spent my life building a legacy, James said, his voice steady. But what's it worth without good? You showed me real wealth is what you give love, time, care. I want our legacy to be this garden, this community, our life together. Emily cupped his face, her eyes shining. For a billionaire, you're pretty wise. She kissed him softly, the world fading around them. As stars emerged, James held her, surrounded by the community they'd nurtured. For the first time, he felt truly rich, not with money, but with a heart full of love freely given. Their future stretched before them, rooted in purpose and blooming with possibility, a legacy far greater than any tower, a life built on love, shared under the open sky.